Hello, this is Erica. I just wanted to share a little bit of background knowledge about UPS Check with different people asking about how it came about. I thought I would go ahead and explain that. Um, UPS Check was actually an idea that originated from the Teaks, and the old Teaks actually said those words, and I'll show those to you in just a minute. And I was introduced to it the year I was teaching fourth grade math. It was my first year to teach upper level math. And my friend that was my mentor at the time, Deb Vandegrift, explained to me that it was important for kids to go through the process when they were solving a problem, and that she had always used UPS Check with her students and had been successful. So I had started out doing that with my kids, but it seemed still kind of like this abstract set of steps. And so I started having my kids put their ideas into a graphic organizer. And at that time, there were 4 steps. So we used 4 boxes. And that was U for understanding, P for planning, S for solving, and then checking. And that was helpful to my kiddos. And we also, in the plan, had to come up with an idea to make that more concrete where we could act it out or draw out the picture or whatever we might choose to do. And so I added that as well into the plan box to use thinking patterns. Deb had always talked to me about thinking patterns, but again, it was kind of an abstract concept. We used the ones that Saxon used, which were some and some more, some went away, bigger, smaller difference, equal groups put together, equal groups take apart. And that was just fine, and it worked perfectly fine. But again, I needed that concrete way, so we started drawing circle diagrams for equal groups, and at that time we called them bar diagrams, or part whole mats for adding and subtracting. So a few years ago when the TEKS changed, we changed those thinking patterns as well so that they use the vocabulary of joining and separating as the TEKS specify starting in first grade. Maybe kindergarten. I can't really remember exactly right this second. But we wanted to continue that vocabulary throughout, and so we changed our thinking patterns at the time, and I'll go into more detail with that in just a moment. But that kind of gives you a little bit of background knowledge about where this idea came from. So I'm going to go ahead and go into the first step, which is to understand, and that's this box right here. And I always tell my kids that if they are going to need to understand a problem, they have to read the problem. And so we have a little chant that says, to understand the problem, you have to read the problem. And then they say, what am I looking for? And next to the question mark, they're trying to think about, what am I looking for? So they go into the problem, and usually that's in the question. So they bracket the question, and that helps them to know that within that question, I'm going to write down what I'm looking for. And I tell them to do that in as few words as possible because we don't want them to spend a bunch of time writing. And then the next thing that they do is they say, okay, what do I know? And they go and they circle important numbers that are in the problem. Now, some of the numbers may not be numbers that they need, so they have to think about, is this something I need to answer this question that I originally was asked? And so we go ahead and write down the things that we know, and we circle those as well in the problem. Okay, and then we move on to the plan box. In the plan box, we talk to them about using a strategy, which could be so many things. They can act it out, draw a picture, work backwards, make a table, all these things. We focus a lot on on drawing a picture or a strip diagram at this time. And when I first started that, the strip diagram wasn't part of our TEKS, and so I would tell them they could draw, a circle diagram, and I still let them do that if that's what helps them. But we also really emphasize the strip diagrams or bar diagrams with the kids because that's part of our TEKS. So here are the strip diagram ideas with thinking patterns. And so you can see this one is join unequal groups. So they're joining 3 and 6 together. And when they're joining those two together, that tells them they're going to add if the two groups are unequal. Now, I do talk to them about the fact that they could be adding 3 plus 3, and they're still joining groups. But later on they would see that connection to multiplication. But to just keep it simple, we're just having them join unequal groups. And in kindergarten and first grade, you could just say, am I joining? Am I separating? And then in first grade, joining, separating, or comparing. You could do that. So they also have separating two unequal groups. So I have 10 that I have this big total of, and then I have 3, maybe that those 3 went away. And so I ask what I have left. For comparing, maybe I'm saying which one is bigger, which one is smaller, which one's more, which one's less. And so I'm comparing 7 to 4 to find the difference. And so that thinking pattern is called CUG. This one is Sug, this one is Jug, but I don't have the kids call them by those names so much. I have them say the actual words. We're joining unequal groups, separating unequal groups, or comparing unequal groups. And basically that's where it would stop at first grade. And for first grade, I would just give them this sheet that only has that much. But then as they get older in second grade and above, they're going to be looking at problems where they're joining equal groups or separating equal groups. And that would be JEG and SEG. And with division, there's 2 options there. They could be finding how many are in each group, or they could be trying to find the number of groups. And so when they're doing that, they have to divide either way. But that's going to make their strip diagram look different depending on that part of it. A lot of people ask, why can't I just teach them the keywords? There's some funny things out there on Twitter about keywords these days. Burn the keywords is what I hear a lot of times. But those keywords are probably pretty reliant in the lower grades, but then the kids get so focused on those keywords that as they get older, those problems can trick them. And so they're relying too much on those. And so we want the kids to focus more on the concept or the situation that's happening rather than the key words. And they need to be able to pull out the words and the meaning from the situation rather than focusing on keywords in a problem. And I'll give some more examples of that throughout the year so that you guys can see some examples of that. Here's some of the reasons that we want to teach the thinking patterns or situations rather than the keywords. It always will work if it's a strategy that's a sense-making strategy. And there's a lot of problems that don't have any keywords. And if they rely on keywords, there's times that they're going to have no strategy because that's what they've relied on so much. And it actually encourages them to ignore the meaning and structure of the problem because they're looking for an easy way out. So I hope that kind of clarifies a little bit of that. It also, thinking patterns help them see trends in the different types of problem situations and helps them focus on those concepts that go with the different operations, whether it's adding, subtracting, multiply, or dividing. And then I added in those diagrams, like I showed you, to go with each one. When we changed the thinking patterns to be aligned with our new TEKS vocabulary, we also made these little characters that are strip diagram characters, and I wrote a little silly, cheesy book that goes along with those to explain kind of where those strip diagrams fit in with the thinking patterns and operation that they go with. So that's a little bit of background on that. I do want to go back and show you where that fits in with the TEKS. All of our process TEKS have this stated, and that is that the student is expected to use a problem-solving model that incorporates analyzing given information, formulating a plan or strategy, determining a solution, justifying the solution, and evaluating the problem-solving process and the reasonableness of the solution. So you can see that where that fits in, and this is how it fit in with the old TEKS, and it was like literally word for word, understand, plan, solve. But now you just have to see that it is the same thing because it says analyze given information, which is when we are in the U box trying to understand and analyze the problem. And that's what the kids are doing when they're saying, okay, what am I looking for and what do I know? And that is part of that. And it's hard for me to say one step is more important than the other ever because they all go so much hand in hand and they're all important. But I would probably say the U and the P are so essential because you could possibly mess up on your computation in the solve. But the U and the P shows that they understand it and what's happening. So the P is using a strategy, and the new TEKS, which aren't that new anymore, say formulate a plan or strategy, and then determine a solution. That's the S box where they actually solve it. And then we have the check, which we used to just literally say check for reasonableness. Well, now we say check and justify and explain. And so we actually put the check still in the fourth box, and then we add a little part at the very bottom for them to write a sentence to explain themselves in a sentence. So that's where UPS check fits into the problem solving model that the TEKS specify. And it's just a way to really help our kids have a starting place and to know that any word problem that they come to is not too much for them because they have a place to start. And it actually builds a lot of confidence in them when they have that. I'll make another video that shows how to actually solve some problems using UPS check, but I wanted to have a little bit of background first. So I'm going to